Salary cap floor. The cap floor is the minimum level of salaries a team must have prior to the start of this NBA season. This number is 90% of the available cap space for a given year. The cap line for the 2025-2026 season is projected to be $154.67 million. So the salary floor would be $139.2 million. This is to prevent teams from filling a team with only minimum players. I know you're probably wondering what happens if you're below that line by the time the season rolls around. Let's say you're $10 million below the salary floor, or around $129 million when the season starts. That $10 million has to be paid to the NBA and then will be distributed to the players at the end of the season. And since billionaire owners don't typically like giving money away, teams are incentivized to get up to that 90%. This is why a young team might trade for a bad contract with a couple years on it for another asset, because they do need some sizable contracts on the roster. Under/over the cap. Okay, so you're probably wondering why I put under the cap and over the cap on the same page here. Well, once you get over the salary floor, whatever space you have left between that and the cap space line, in this case, $156.7 million, is your cap space, and you can use it to sign free agents. Once you're over the cap, there's still room between that and the luxury tax. If you're in that range, you'll only be able to sign outside players with exceptions, such as the mid-level exception, which we'll get into a little bit later, but you don't have to actually pay any extra tax money until the next tier, the luxury tax. The luxury tax line for the 2025-2026 NBA season is $187.9 million. If a team signs a player and the total salaries of the team, plus whatever else may be adding to the salary like cap holds, likely incentives, unlikely incentives that come to fruition during the season, and other dead money, is equal to the luxury tax number or more, then they'll have to pay X amount of tax based on how far over that tax line number they are. Let's say a team is $15 million over the tax line. They'd be in what's considered the third tax bracket. As you can see on the screen here, this is what the different tax brackets would be for the 2025-26 season. So using that $15 million over, they'd be in the third tax bracket, as I just said. So that would be $5.167 million times $1, which is $5.167 million. And then you do $5.67 million times $1.50, which is $7.75 million. And then you do $4.666 million times $3.50. And thus you get $16.331 million. And then you add it all up together. That's a total tax bill of $29.25 million. But it's a little bit different if you're one of the teams that are in the repeater tax. Teams that are in the luxury tax for 4 consecutive seasons or 4 out of 5 seasons are considered a repeater tax team and will pay a more significant penalty. So as you can see on the screen right now, this is the repeater tax brackets. Let's look at that same team. Let's say it's the Cavs or something. That's $15 million over the luxury tax line. Again, you do $5.167 million, but this time times $3, which would be $15.5 million. You do $5.167 million times $3.25, which is equal to $16.79 million. And then you do $4.666 million times $5.50, which is equal to $25.663 million, which funnily enough, that one by itself is pretty close to the number that you get from just like being in the tax line regular and being 15 million over. But you add it all up together and you're at $57.95 million, almost double what it was under normal circumstances. The first apron. All right, so next we got the first apron, which is $195.9 million coming up for this upcoming season. And there's a couple different things that will count against the apron, the first apron and the second apron. In this case, this isn't going to change when we get to the second apron, but that includes player salaries, obviously, including likely bonuses, unlikely bonuses. The bonuses continue to count even if they're not achieved in this case. Minimum salary of a 2-year player. Basically, once you get past that 2-year threshold, you are able to have that money count against the apron. An outstanding qualifying offer, which is what restricted free agents receive, which is why they become restricted free agents. Basically, a team tenders a qualifying offer to them. They can either accept it or they can become a restricted free agent and try to get a contract somewhere else. Any outstanding required tender to a first round pick. So basically, this means if you drafted a player and you still have to sign them to a contract, once you do sign them to that contract, it is going to count against the apron. But what doesn't count against the apron is free agent amounts like cap holds, which cap holds are basically, let's say that you have a player that's a free agent. Until they actually re-sign with you or sign a contract with another team, there's a cap hold that's in place on your salary cap that is basically like a placeholder for them. Any amounts with respect to unsigned first round picks. So in this case, I believe that this is talking about like a draft and stash player. So let's say that you draft a player and they play overseas, don't come to the NBA right away. This is considered usually a draft and stash player because you're still drafting them. You own their draft rights. So when they do come to the NBA, they are going to play for your team, but you don't necessarily have to sign them right away. As an example, a team like the Celtics drafted a player this last year named Hugo Gonzalez. He potentially could have stayed overseas for this upcoming season, and he would be considered a draft and stash player. They wouldn't have to give him a contract right away, but once he does come over, the Celtics have his draft rights, and they would have to sign him. So because he's not actually signed to the team yet, they wouldn't have to actually have that go against their apron. The amount of any salary cap exception that is deemed included in team salary. So this includes the mid-level exception or biannual exception. These are just little things that allow teams that are in these kind of weird areas to be able to still sign players even though they don't have cap space. And last but not least, the amount of any incomplete roster cap hold amount that's added to the team. So next, let's talk about the first apron penalties. First off, you can't use TPEs from the prior year. So let's say that one team, let's say that it's the Raptors. The Raptors decide to trade a player to the 76ers, and the 76ers are sending back less salary. Let's say that the player that the Raptors is sending out is $20 million contract, but the 76ers happen to have the cap space to just send back a $10 million player. That would create a $10 million traded player exception for the Raptors to use. And typically, because it's July, they would have a full year to use that traded player exception in a different trade. But with this right here, this penalty of being over the first apron, as soon as the regular season ends for the prior season, you can no longer use that traded player exception. So even though it technically should expire in July, as soon as the season ends, you can't use it anymore. Next, can't acquire a player in a sign and trade. So obviously now with how the current NBA is, free agents typically don't make it to free agency anymore, especially bigger players. So a lot of these players will get their next contract from their own team and either stay with that team or immediately be traded to another team in a sign and trade. If a team is over the first apron, they can't receive a player via sign and trade, basically is what I'm saying here. There is an exception for this where basically if the trade ends up with you being underneath the first apron when the trade is completed, then you can do it. But under other circumstances, you just can't do it. Can't sign a waived player during the season whose previous salary is more than the full mid-level exception, which for this upcoming season is $14.1 million. Let's say that a team waives a player like Bradley Beal. Let's say he just got waived, he didn't get bought out of his contract. Because his contract was way more than $14 million, and this team is over the first apron, they wouldn't be able to sign him. They would only be able to sign a player like a Grant Williams. Let's say Grant Williams with the Hornets gets waived this upcoming season because he makes less than the mid-level exception. A team that's over the first apron would still be able to sign him. Last but not least, they can still use the taxpayer mid-level exception even if they can't use the full version. So they would still, in this case, have $5.6 million exception to be able to use. Now we get to the second apron. The second apron for the upcoming season is going to be $207.8 million. So as far as what counts against the apron, everything from the first apron, it's still the same here. The same things will apply as far as adding more to the salary and what will count against this apron. But as far as the second apron penalties are considered, take all the first apron penalties and now we're about to add on to it. And you're going to see why teams really don't want to be in the second apron, like at all, really. So first of all, like I said, you get all of the first apron penalties, but also you can't aggregate salaries in a trade. So basically what this means is you just can't add salaries together at all. So let's say that, again, a team wants to send two players out just to be able to get another player back like the Rockets did trading for Kevin Durant. From the Rockets' perspective, they could definitely do that because they're not a second apron team. But from the Suns' perspective, if they wanted to trade Grayson Allen and Nick Richards together in a trade and get another player back for them or two players back for them, they wouldn't be able to do that, which is why Kevin Durant had to be traded by himself. You also have to have the salaries that are coming back be pretty close to 100% of your outgoing salary, which is why the trade for, let's say again, Kevin Durant, his salary and the salary of Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks is about equal. It's pretty close, which is why that trade was able to work at the end of the day. You can't send out cash in a trade or basically buy picks. A lot of the times teams would try to, if they didn't have a draft pick for a specific year, sometimes they would just send like $1 million to a team and literally just get a couple second round picks from them or a second round pick from them. Now you can't even do that. So as you can see, over all these things adding together is what makes it hard for you to even get out of the second apron once you get into it. Because if you have to match salaries that closely, you can't just send out Kevin Durant and just get back like a $10 million player back. Obviously, that would significantly reduce your salary, but you can't actually do that because the salaries have to be very close. Using the Celtics as an example again, because obviously they were in this situation this offseason. In the Kristaps Porzingis trade, they were lucky enough to be able to make a trade that involved the one team that actually did have cap space, you know what I'm saying, which is the Brooklyn Nets. In the Porzingis trade, they got that 3-team deal off and were able to significantly lower their salary in that trade. It's hard to get off these big contracts that you have if you're already over the second apron, especially if you're over it significantly by like 20 million, like how the Celtics were. This is all just more reason for teams not to want to actually be in the second apron to begin with. Okay, and next up, we got some of the more damning penalties that come with being in the second apron, specifically if you're in it for consecutive seasons. Your first round pick, let's say, first off, I'm going to put a chart on the screen that basically is going to illustrate what happens when your team is in the second apron and they continuously are. So first of all, as we look at this first chart right here, in year one, the first year, or year zero, I guess, the year that you're over the second apron, your pick 7 years from then gets frozen immediately. So by frozen, it means that you can't trade it, you can't do anything with it. That first round pick is just there and you can't touch it. It's similar to how in the Stepien rule, you can't trade picks in consecutive seasons, basically treat it that way. So if you look at it and they're over it again for the second year, you see that the next year's pick, 8 years from where we're first starting, 7 years from the second season, is also frozen. So now both of those picks are frozen. And here's the real kicker. The real kicker is the fact that you have to be out of the second apron 3 of the next 4 seasons to unfreeze the pick. Okay? So that doesn't sound too bad at first glance, but when you're looking at this chart, that's a lot of years out. That is a lot of years out. So here they have year 0 over the second apron, year 1 over the second apron. Now they're under the second apron for 1, 2, 3 straight years, and then both of those picks were able to be unfrozen. But as soon as they're over the second apron the next year, 7 years out, year 12 pick, frozen again, just like that. And it would take another 3 years under to get that pick unfrozen. So they didn't even make it where you could immediately get back that pick at any point. You pretty much have to do a very gradual year by year planning of your salary to make sure that you're able to even have access to that pick. And it just compounds and compounds if you do not. Now we're going to look at, let's say that you don't just be out of the second apron for 3 consecutive seasons. This is why I don't think teams are going to be in it for longer than 2 years at the max. So in this situation, year 0, they're over the second apron. That same year 7 pick gets frozen. In year 2, or year 1, I'm sorry, they're over the second apron again. That year 8 pick is frozen. Now they're under the second apron for a year. Okay. But they're over it again the next year. Now they double down on your ass because that year 7 pick is not just frozen now where you can't trade it, you can't do anything with it, but now it also moves to the end of the first round. So I know you're probably wondering, what if multiple teams are in the situation for that year? At that point, it goes by the standings in reverse order. So basically it would be one team's going to be 30, the next one's going to be 29, et cetera, et cetera. But Not only can you not trade that pick, but now is guaranteed to be a late first round pick. Even if you're crap that year and you probably should have a top 10 pick, that pick is going to move to the end of the first round. And on top of that, the year 10 pick, still 7 years out from where we're at this point in year 3, is also going to be frozen. And then you have to be under 3. Okay, so because you were under in year 2, if you're under the next 2, that year 8 pick does get unfrozen, but it's too late to unfreeze that year 7 pick at that point. And then if you're under it again, that year 10 pick gets unfrozen. But again, you just got to charge that year 7 pick to the game at that point. And if you're trying to continuously be in it for 3 years straight, 4 years straight, now you're just not going to have access to any of your draft picks going into the future. And no team wants to be in that situation. Aggregating the salaries is a huge thing for making it tough to make any kind of transactions. You can't do sign and trades. You can't sign a player unless it's a minimum player. You can't move draft picks. Like, you can't buy draft picks. You can't get your draft pick back once it gets frozen for 3 years. Yeah. And then on top of that, you also have the same thing I was talking about before with the salary tax line. It still adds into this, which is why a team like the Celtics was going to pay like $500 million with the regular salary of the team and then tax money on top of it, which is just ludicrous. And I don't care who you are. I don't make $1 billion, but they take too much tax out of my money. So I know a billionaire not going for that at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, all it does is put pressure on these front offices to not be in that situation to begin with. So if you didn't see my previous video, you definitely want to watch that one after this one, because I go through specific examples of which teams are probably going to be in this situation over the next couple seasons. So I use very specific examples, starting with the Celtics who are already in the situation, and then who I believe are going to be the next teams that are going to have to deal with this. So it's a very good companion video for this, where you kind of really get to see how this stuff is going to affect some of these teams going forward. And with that being said, thank you for watching the video. Please like the video if you got this far. Subscribe for more content like this. Pray that your team doesn't get in the second apron. Just keeping it a buck. Thank you.